Landlords of Reddit, who are the worst tenants you have ever had? My parents rented an apartment at a very reasonable rate to an electrician in return for him doing minor maintenance. The guy somehow rewired the incoming electricity so that it came from our parents' electric meter instead of his. Their bill shot up over double, almost triple, and he claimed to know nothing about it. I managed a 6-unit apartment building at one point, and the person who moved in the 3rd floor was an absolute nightmare. He stopped paying rent pretty quickly and knew the laws for eviction. So there were several months I couldn't get access to, and none of the other residents ever saw the guy. They knew he was up there because of the noise and, more importantly, the smell. Eventually I got him out. When I went in there, the smell was almost overwhelming. Turns out he was breeding huskies in the apartment. 5 months. Breeding huskies, never taking them out, never taking garbage out. There wasn't an inch of floor that wasn't covered in crap. When I moved the crap covered mattress, that was the only spot on the floor where I could see the actual carpet. I ripped up the carpets, cut out the floor, bleached every surface and closed off that apartment. When I took the butthole to court, he showed up and tried to press charges for defamation of character based on me referring to him as a scumbag. I told the judge that I stuck with that assessment and showed photos. The judge laughed at him. Never got a dime from that worthless freak. I never took care of residential apartments again. I know this was a crap situation for a number of reasons, but I can't help thinking about those poor dogs living in stinkin' filth. Parents rented a 5-bed 2-bath house when we temporarily moved away. They had it for 2 years. They broke every door. Not even the attic door was undamaged. It was literally a painted piece of plywood. Neighbors all installed privacy fences after the renters were held at gunpoint by cops too many times in the backyard. They stopped paying rent and still thought they'd get the deposit back when they left. Parents had about $15,000 in damage to the house. Court awarded roughly that amount after it was settled. Neighbors all installed privacy fences after the renters were held at gunpoint by cops too many times in the backyard. Ahahaha. Hope they used 3-stroke 8AR 500 panels for the fence. LOL. You know, for privacy. I have a few investment properties, so unfortunately I've had a few. One almost burnt the property down. But one of the worst experiences I've had was when I had to kick my cousin out, who was living in the house for years, for half the rent I usually charge, and he knew he would never get a better deal elsewhere for a 4-bedroom 3-bathroom house close to school where his kids go. I had given him ample time to move out since I wanted to sell it, but when a potential buyer wanted to inspect it, he called the police on the real estate agent. Fortunately I was there at the time to sort it out, but I've never had police come over before. I was actually going to help him with his next rental property, but not after that episode. My brothers always told me I was too kind on him. I always treated my cousin like one of my brothers, but he lost me after that. I don't know how he did it, but after some student moved out, the whole kitchen was covered about an inch thick layer of grease. My money is on shittens of frying without any attempt to ventilate. My friend had a tenant who was a hoarder, and she wouldn't let him in to look at a leaking pipe. She had installed another lock, but wanted him to pay for someone to come and fix it. He just called the cops and said something along the lines of, "My tenant has locked me out of my property." She was forced to let him in and eventually got evicted, but took 2 months to move out and did not pay rent the last 2 months either, and demanded her deposit back after causing thousands of dollars worth of damage to the place. In an apartment complex, girl hadn't paid her rent for the month. Sent her a bunch of notices. No response. We go in after the allotted time to make sure she's not dead and see if she's just abandoned the property. More likely scenario. Thankfully, we go in, and the smell of dog urine and feces hits you in the face like your drunk stepdad. We walk in and the place has been cleared out except for trash everywhere and a destroyed futon laying upside down in the living room. We walk in and here comes, running, a bone-thin black lab puppy. He is literally so excited to see us. The pose girl just left her puppy in the abandoned apartment without any food or water except a torn to shreds bag of dog food and a licked clean bucket of water. Meanwhile, the pup is literally running out of places to go to the bathroom, and the food is now gone, for who knows how long. Yep, that apartment had to basically be gutted, the smell was so bad. The puppy ended up at the shelter and I'm sure got adopted because he was super sweet. Wrote this a couple days ago for another thread, so I'll post it here. I do maintenance for a bunch of apartments. A lot of crazies live there. One lady has all her walls covered in neatly taped pieces of paper with numbers and writing on them. She also wears a garbage bag as a hat when it's cold and socks on her hands. There is also a literal inch of dust from tissues next to her tissue box. Another tenant, who was in rough shape physically and mentally, had poop on his bathroom walls and ceiling, as well as his clothes. He never bathed in his apartment, smelled really bad, things went really south when he bought a puppy, and never let it out. The thing grew a lot in a few months and hardly ever went outside. It trashed the apartment because it wasn't trained and there was poop and pee everywhere. The smell of ammonia was so strong that I got a sore throat from taking a few breaths in there. His pulmonary edema got way worse, which led him to go to the hospital for the weekend. So he locked his dog in the bathroom for the entire time. Another tenant heard it barking non-stop. Police were called. Dog was taken away. The tenant had to pay for everything in the apartment to be redone. We tried getting a steam cleaning guy to come for the carpets, but it was so bad that it ruined his machine. Eventually, floors were ripped out, walls repainted, and nearly all furniture was thrown away. The place still smelled awful, but it's what we could do with a week's worth of work. One tenant just has the messiest apartment I've ever seen. We were just doing fire inspections the other day, so a guy from the fire depot walks through to make sure the smoke detectors and whatnot are all installed. Everyone got notice at least a week beforehand. So we get to this guy's apartment and knock, and it takes 5 minutes for him to answer the door. When he does, he has green spray paint under his nose from huffing it recently, and the apartment is so messy that you can't see the floor. It's literally knee-high in garbage, clothing, food scraps and plates. Worse is that he's got space heaters sitting on all this garbage going full throttle. He's also got pee taped to the walls. Walls are also covered in stains. Fire inspector asks the tenant the last time he vacuumed. Tenant replies very seriously that he vacuumed this week. Also after Christmas. Instead of throwing his tree out, he left it in the hallway, so there's an ankle deep huge pile of all the pine needles from his Christmas tree. He asks me my name every time I see him, and he always says he's friends with my dad. He is not. I am currently writing a song about this. Upvote for Trotel, thanks Julia. They were 3 kids, probably their first place moving out from home. Students. 2 girls, 1 guy. I noticed the guy was always super quiet, and the girls always got involved and took the lead when we were around for repairs. Anyway, one day he overdosed. I guess. He was just a kid really. He was either still in school, or just got out. His life hadn't really started yet. That's sad. I'm sorry. Obligatory, not a landlord, but my father is, and I've helped him take care of his houses. He owns most of his apartments in lower income areas, and most of his apartments he will rent to people on welfare or a program like that. He does this so that he is pretty much guaranteed some sort of payment every month because it comes from the government. Well, we had these 1 renters who had that welfare program, but it didn't cover all of the rent, so the tenants had to come up with the rest. The amount that these tenants had to pay was $80 a month for them to have a 2-bedroom apartment. Well, they move in and first month rolls around and they don't have it, but it's $80, like who cares? They say they'll pay $160 next month. The next month they don't have it either. By this time my stepdad felt like he was being used, so we go to stop by the apartment to talk to them and see what was up. We knock on the door and this strange odor comes out, and we both are like, what the heck is that smell? They say it was nothing and are being very odd, keeping the door mostly shut, looking around, and just seemed off. Well, someone else was also in the apartment and opened the door again to come outside, so we got to peek inside. That's when we saw a gas mask sitting on a table next to chemistry equipment, flasks, burner, etc. By now it was pretty clear what they were up to, as the town where this was is pretty well known for so we pretend like we didn't see it and just leave and immediately call the cops and give them permission to the property. Not an hour later they call us back telling us they found an operational lab along with pounds of marijuana. Worst part is because they were cooking that apartment couldn't be rented out without massive renovations because of the chemicals, and my stepdad did not see a penny paid back. TLDR, tenants using government money to rent an apartment to make I'm a devout Buddhist, so I try every day to make a real difference in people's lives that are suffering. I rented an apartment to a woman with a child. She was a severe abuse survivor, as was her child. English was not her first language and she was ADA compliant. She was missing a hand, cut off by her ex-husband. She had no past, a green card, no credit history, and had arrived from Angola. She paid for 3 months and then did not move in. Place sat empty for 90 days. At the end she moved in and thought she had paid rent for the next 3 months. When I explained and showed her the lease, she started crying and told me that she was about to homeless, her child taken from her and returned to her ex-husband, and that she wanted to die. I changed the dates on her lease to current and let her stay. She never had the power turned on and did her laundry on the balcony in a bucket. I just felt bad for her. I couldn't imagine what she had been through. At the end of the 3 months she didn't pay the rent and moved in 5 guys into a single apartment. It got loud and crazy fast. They were driving a different car every day. Big fights in the halls and parking lot. When I told the guy he had to move or pay rent, he tried to threaten me and change the locks. People coming and going constantly, and then the smell started. I finally had to call the cops. I served eviction on them and had to wait for the court proceedings to progress. Finally 3 months after that they got evicted and I sent the marshals in. Guy attacked the cop with a machete. Got shot and they called the SWAT team. Got ugly from there. They pumped the unit full of tear gas and beat the crap out of everyone who ran out. Girl and child long gone, like moths ago, and they found a huge stash of weapons and a half-eaten German Shepherd. The apartment was so bad inside they had to gut it completely. Walls, floors, everything. Long Beach, CA, 1994. If you like this story, I'll tell you what the inside looked like. A half-eaten German Shepherd. Criminy crap. That is. I don't even know what to do with any of it. Friend of mine rented to people who ran a rim house. His house was closed off with hazmat stuff. Insurance wouldn't cover it. He had to pay thousands of dollars to clean the walls, have it repainted, everything out of the building, new flooring, and more. My parents were landlords and they rent out houses they own. But anyway, they had rented out their old house we lived in for a few years. They had owned since 1992 and we had rented it to a lady and her boyfriend in 2004. Few months later, she had accidentally burned it and the whole entire floor was burned while the basement was fine, but the windows had busted out from the heat. She had all these crockpots and these flimsy extension cords and it had started a fire. My mom wonders if she was making drugs. But anyway, she had no renter's insurance and she expected my parents to give her money for all the stuff she had lost. She even tried to guilt trip them, but my coworkers said, "You guys will give me money if you're decent people." I lost $30,000 of my stuff and my mom said, and I lost a $200,000 house. She was even mad when she came by the house and saw it had all been cleaned out. She had never came back for her stuff to see what she could salvage, so we had to clean it out and haul to the dump, and some stuff we kept like cookie jars we found, and we salvaged the toilets, but we had to clean the smoke off and replace the parts. And the flusher. The clothes that were not melted and burned had smoke damage, so they had to be tossed. I also found a cassette tape that survived the fire. Some of these are horrifying. Mine not so bad by comparison. I have 3 townhomes I rent out. We have a company that manages them, so I don't have to deal with people. One tenant we rented to because of a sob story. The background check came back okay, but they were from Syria and said they were escaping the bad things going on at the time. Immigration papers in order, we agreed. We had to replace the washing machine because they kept gumming up the insides when putting the washing liquid in the bleach dispenser. Then complained when their clothes wouldn't get clean. We had to have a plumber out several times because so much air down the drain. We had to replace the brand new stove because they kept setting it on fire. Their kids drew on the walls, in pen, paint and markers. They said they didn't have pets, so someone was peeing on the floor in one corner. They broke all the shelves in the fridge, which was new when they moved in. Then when we refused to renew the lease, they got mad when we wouldn't give them the appliances when they moved out. No good deed goes unpunished. I bet your parents never took on another sob story after all of that. This happened a couple years ago. Our tenants decided that it would be cool if they grew marijuana in our house before it became legal. To do this, they destroyed our AC and installed heat lamps to grow the weed 24/7. Now, we had like monthly checkups on our house. The first thing we noticed was that the AC was not working in specific rooms. We hired a guy to fix them as it was our house, and thought it wasn't their fault. Apparently, they would destroy the AC right after we fixed them. This happened 3 times before we decided something was fishy. They left right before we found the marijuana. Side note, it was a couple. One of them had a crappy credit score because of previous scams like this. But when they came to rent our house, they used the cleaner of the 2 credit scores. Now, both of them are ruined. Not a landlord technically, but I rent a room in my house. So, the worst tenant I ever had was this one chick. It was back when I was only charging like $400. Because my mortgage is low, I bought at a good time. But she complained because she took a job that was on the opposite end of the city after renting the room from me. My house is exactly 4 lights from being on the freeway, which goes around the whole city, and connects to the one that passes through the center. Even with traffic, getting anywhere here takes roughly 30 minutes. She had 2 small dogs that barked constantly when she wasn't around, like it would take them an hour to stop. I wanted to kill them, and I'm a pacifist. They were also very poorly house trained, and constantly left little presents. She also never bought them dog food, so they just would steal my dog's food. My dog is a large dog and eats large dog food. She also moved all her stuff into her room and the guest room, but never really unpacked her boxes, like there were just boxes in the rooms. And she never slept in the room she rented out. She slept in either the guest room or on the couch. It was roughly 90% couch too. I would get up to go to work and she would freak out, like I walked into her bedroom. Luckily she moved out of like 3 months, and it was amazing. Rule to people: don't get pets if you don't have a stable place to live. Also, train your freaking dogs, especially little ones. I now refuse to ever date a woman who has a dog under 50 pounds because of her. No, I never hooked up with her or tried. She was gross. Like super gross. I have a house that I bought brand new and I had to move out due to work. I lived in that house for 5 years and they only lived for 2. They did $8,000 in damages and they paid $6,500 because about $1,500 of it was wear and tear. Dogs dug into the carpet. They destroyed the sink on the small bathroom completely and needed to be replaced. The rest of the damage was holes on walls, chewed doors, cleaning, etc. They really neglected and abused the house property while they were renting it. I've rented to 3 families since and haven't had any issues with them. Still mad over that first mad raging family that lived there though. Was renting a house and after 3 months they didn't pay. Had to take them to court to evict them and the courts will frick you. Took 6 months to legally evict them. The house was just a mess. I've literally never heard a story like this where the house was in a reasonable condition afterwards. WTF is wrong with people? I'll never know. I actually rent a house off of my parents that they have leased out for 30 years. There's been some disease come through, but this last chick, she left the house for days at a time. Little did we know she left her dog home alone to pee and crap on the floor so heavily that removing the carpet wasn't enough. My dad had to cut out the floorboards in the most heavily soiled areas, like so you could see through to the basement. She always paid the rent late, and when she did she would sneak into my parents' house to drop the check off, like with them home sitting there, instead of knocking, just sneak in and leave it under a plant. Then she never responded to my dad's requests to pay her fair share of the damages, which exceeded the security deposit. Did I mention she flushed tampons and underwear down the toilet that showed up when the septic tank was drained? Not exactly a landlord, but a son of landlords. When I was 9 or 10, a tenant had gotten into some argument with us and proceeded to trash the entire property. We're talking trash stuffed up the chimney, scratches all over the living room, to name a few. My parents recorded this evidence and won a court battle where the tenant had to pay a hefty fine and damages and move immediately. We've had great tenants ever since. So, after reading some of the horrors in the comments, I feel like we got off super easy, but I'll share anyway because it should give some laughs. One of my best friends owns the house I live in, and her girlfriend and I have a solid family vibe, but rent our spare bedroom. We've had mostly good luck, but our last tenant was quite a case. We all had a bit of a weird feeling about him, but his reference seemed okay and he had some similar interests. He claimed to be an art student and a Buddhist and a vegan. which we aren't, but it's relevant to the story. About a month after he moved in, my other roomies left to house sit for family for a few weeks. As soon as they left, weird crap started happening. A package of pork chops disappeared from our fridge. An unknown pair of socks appeared in my room. Coins got stolen. Every time something happened, we would relay it to the new guy to see if he'd noticed anything weird, which of course he hadn't. We dismissed the idea of it being him because the only food that ever went missing was meat, and he was a vegan. Apparently, we thought maybe someone was breaking in, so we changed the lock codes and, obviously, told the new guy. At first it was like one weird thing a week, but it got far more frequent and my roomies ended up coming home a few days early because I felt unsafe not knowing what the frick was going on. Things quieted down after they came back and the locks had been changed, but then he said he was having issues with his bank the following month and asked if he could pay in a couple weeks. Being a compassionate person and still not clued into him being our thief, my friend said that was fine, and then he slowly disappeared. It took us a week or so to realize none of us had seen him all week, so assuming the worst, like he'd been hurt badly, we spent an entire day trying to track him down. Even called the university to email him because he wasn't responding to our increasingly concerned texts. After a couple of days with zero contact, we finally decided we needed to check his room. He had moved out, but left multiple boxes of belongings, and we found a bunch of our stuff in his room. Then our friend messaged to say she'd seen him at a store. We texted him to say we changed the locks, so if he wanted his stuff he'd have to text and that we would hold on to it for 3 months. That was a month ago and still no word, but we saw him walking in our neighborhood today. Also saw an ad he posted on Kijiji over a week before his bank issues looking for a new room to rent. So a ghost and a thief. At least we'll make some money off the crap he left behind. Landlord here, but for storage spaces. I've been renting out a garage space to this lady for about 10 years, but since mid 2018 she went quiet and hasn't paid rent in at least 8 months. I have no use for the garage, so I don't really care about it because I'm patient. So a month ago I emailed and posted and texted her an official termination of agreement and put in her 2 weeks to clear out whatever was in there, and get absolutely nothing. At one point I actually thought she had died because no matter what I tried I couldn't get any form of contact. There is a council cleanup next week and I told her if she didn't pay or come to pick up her stuff I would dump it all. So this morning I get a knock at my door. There she is, very much alive, yelling and cussing at me for even thinking of touching her stuff. She actually called the police and told them that I wrongfully dumped and destroyed her property. I calmly told the officers what was going on and showed them all the legal documents stating that she hadn't paid and no contact or appeals have occurred in 8 months' time. They of course sided with me and actually contacted a civil claims court to start a ruling for her to pay me. Court date is next week. She owes me $2,500. I still have a gut feeling she won't pay no matter what happens. Apparently I've had 2 full fisting pornos filmed independently by 2 different people in my house while I was out of town. Tenants didn't even know each other, somehow both stumbled upon the opportunity randomly. Also had a Lebanese guy order a prostitute on his 4th day in the house, 45 minutes after I left for vacation. Then he refused to pay her and had a screaming argument in the backyard because she had a good time too, didn't she? Roommates had already removed him from the property by the time I got back after my now 2-hour road trip. 20-year landlord. At one time we had 50 units. I used a corn scoop to clean the floor of a 1300 square featuring double wide trailer. Another that springs to mind was the one with a big gas space heater that we used a yard rake under to get the chicken bones out. But the winner was an evicted tenant left their young beagle pup in the house after they moved. He didn't make it. No tools to dig a hole, so the municipal trash can was pretty much the only option. This is August in Tennessee. 3-day weekend. The neighbor called to report a smell that sickened the entire block. I did section 8 for a bit. Got a couple in immediately. 2 months in I got notified that an inspector had been called. Which is odd because I wasn't notified of any problem, so I couldn't fix it. I go in with the inspector and the toilet is stained. Mind you, this is a pretty new toilet. Tried my best but nothing would unstain that toilet bowl while the inspector was there. So I was obligated to buy a brand new toilet. 6 weeks go by. The couple complained again. I went and there was weeks worth of crap clogging the toilet. They hadn't been flushing. I physically had to scoop out the fecal matter with gardening tools and plunge for a half hour before calling a plumber. He came and took a full hour to get it flowing again. Inspector got called again. The toilet was stained. I showed her the receipt for the plumber, with problems description, and the receipt for the toilet I had just bought. Didn't matter. I had to buy a new one even though these renters had stained it themselves due to what I will say is very gross neglect. I felt conflicted about the whole situation. The apartment wasn't luxury, but I felt good about renting it to underprivileged people. It was nicer than your average place. In the end, an inspector had come a third time and told me I was on thin ice for ignoring the tenants' basic needs. I couldn't evict them legally. It took 10 more months before they left on their own accord. After they were out, I found thousands of dollars worth of other damage. They had let water run into the living room constantly from a shower head being left on. They would park their car against the deck, stop rolling, so I had to replace the supports. I never Section 8 rented again. Daughter of a former landlord. We rented out our family home. We had one tenant that burnt out a car. You could see where the asphalt had melted for years. Same guy had put about 40 holes in the walls. From the sounds of it, there were a lot of domestics. I found blood splattered on the wall. They dumped a whole bunch of their clothes and other rubbish under the house. Left some furniture and appliances as well. That was fun to clean up. The last tenant we had in the house thought he was awesome at DIY. I'll admit the house was dated, but what he did was terrible. He painted a door bright red, looked like nail polish. He painted the skirting board in the darkest room dark blue. He put up waterproof shower boards up, but they weren't on securely. Painted some of the kitchen cupboards with wall paint. Everything but the skirting board you could scratch off with your nails. That was also a fun time redoing his work. She had been keeping a goat in the laundry room. Even the ceiling was brown. Gaia. She left the place with heaps of trash. We found a mother cat with kittens abandoned on a sofa in the living room. She was a veterinary assistant who had come with references from the vet. Cheers. My mom was a landlord for 30 years. This guy was always late on rent, loud parties, and doing alleged criminal stuff. She tried to evict him, but it is so hard to do. After I tried, this guy and a few others beat the crap out of my brother. Some time later he was catcalling at my mom and sister, so my bro told him to frick off. Him and another came walking down to our apartment saying they were gonna kick his butt again, and my bro grabbed a baseball bat that just happened to be there. He cracked the tenant's buddy in the head with it and the tenant passed out. Bro got arrested, had a trial. The guy he hit came in court drunk and was disrespectful to the judge. Told him to frick off or something. Judge said you used a weapon, so I can't give you nothing. So few months probation. Bro still couldn't live on THW property all this time cause of the distance between them. We eventually evicted the tenant by a loophole that says if you're moving in family you can kick them out with 2 months notice. We kept it vacant for a few months and rented it again. Years later mom sold the complex to foreigners. They kept her on as a property manager, but we lived elsewhere. The new tenants that took our suite refused to pay rent for 6 months and sue the owners because they didn't have enough parking. Our suite was the largest and had its own parking area that could fit 3 easy, as well as the regular parking area that had room for 2 cars if you parked one behind the others, plus street parking. They got 6 months free. We told the owners the loophole and they eventually used it, but the renters trashed the place. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.